Hello and welcome to Widowed AF. You're here with me, I'm your host, Rosie Gilmoss. Every week I invite somebody to come onto the podcast and tell their story from the forefront of widowhood. And today I have Michelle Watson Rhodes from Cardiff. Welcome to the podcast, Michelle.
Hi, Rosie.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as always, I know the bare bones. Well, it sounds a bit gruesome when you're doing a widow podcast, right? But I know the bare bones. Michelle's fiancé, Mike, died from an acute heart attack. And am I right in thinking that was really close to your planned wedding?
Yes, that's right. Just 6 months before we were due to get married.
Gosh, that was inconsiderate of him, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, Michelle, normally what I will do is I'll ask the guest to tell me a little bit about their person, because when we're grieving, we do talk a lot about the aftermath, the death, and sometimes that person gets a little bit lost in the narrative. And so I think it's really nice to give people an opportunity to tell me how you and Mike met. Tell me what life was like leading up to this catastrophe. You must have been happy. You were planning a wedding. So, and as I said to you before we came on the microphone, if you want to stop at any point, because this is what you're going to do is hard, and I would never downplay that. Okay, so you're really brave for even sitting across from me right now. So, Michelle, tell me about Mike. Who was Mike? Talk to me a bit about
him. Full of life, funny, kind. He'd had a difficult upbringing and childhood, but despite all that, he just always put people first. Music and fitness was very central to him, and so was family and friends. Well, probably more so friends than family, because he sort of made the painful decision to unfortunately become estranged from most of his family.
Okay.
And so friends just became the center of his world and our world, really, because I was of a similar upbringing as well. So our values were very much aligned. Strong work ethic. He'd been in the army. He'd spent some time in there. And so that was really important to him, to kind of just pick people up, motivate them, really be there for them in all sorts of difficult troubles that they were going through. He was always somebody who would think about what that person needed and how could he best kind of be helpful. Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that he was, really into his fitness and he was from the army. And then, I know that he died from a heart attack. And of course, that doesn't tally, does it? This is not the sort of thing you expect to happen to somebody like that. How did you guys meet?
Ironically, at a gym.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so at kind of hitting 40, I'd had enough of doing the whole dating apps, Rosie, and I just thought, right, I am just going to focus on me. And I signed myself up to this horrendous kind of grueling fitness regime. And it was just in a sort of lock-up unit in Cardiff, and just started there religiously 3 times a week. And I got myself into a good routine. I was in a good place. It was a lovely sort of, community of women. And then there was a little separate unit for all the men, so it was a separate kind of, men did their thing in their unit, and women.
All the grunting and the sweating.
Yeah, that's right. And that was where we met. He was a coach again. Ironically, he was also the one of the coaches for the gym. And we just sort of passed. He'd pop in, he'd be eating his, smoothies and chicken and rice and all that sort of healthy stuff. It was just a very slow sort of conversation. But the sort of slightly nice love story part of it was that, unbeknownst to me, he'd actually asked my coach, who's that girl that comes on a Wednesday? And she was like, Mike, look, there's hundreds of women that come on the Wednesday, not hundreds, but a lot,
narrow
20,
it down
30,
a bit.
you're going to have to narrow it down a bit for me. Yeah. So, and I had also asked her, who's the guy next door? Who's the coach? Like, what's his story? But we didn't know that about each other. But yeah, we just one Christmas, one winter, we just sort of chatted a little bit more, and then that chat just sort of developed, I suppose. And then very quickly, just in the 2020, he was a what's the word that they used to use in COVID? Where you had to go to work, where you weren't
Oh, a
allowed to
key
stay at
worker.
home. Key worker, that was it. So he was a key worker, I was a key worker, but we weren't really seeing anybody else, and we were just chatting, and we just became our only sort of other communication for each other, or another person to interact with. He was living on his own, I was living on my own, so it was like the only person we were chatting to, and that just really built. And then we had a lot of time just really talking, because that's all we could. We didn't do the dating thing, we weren't seeing friends, but we spent a lot of time, simple things, Rosie, like just cooking together, like I say, just sitting and walking and chatting, a bit of fitness together in a field. We'd be doing some fitness and just kind of just having a laugh, and just trying to be and get through the whole odd time that we were at that point, just making the best of it in
And
each other's company.
in a world where dating is so kind of almost disposable, and you mentioned the dating apps, and it's so quick and your decisions are made so quickly, what you've described is that lovely old-fashioned slow burn where you build a solid friendship
Yes.
and a real relationship. It's not this kind of swipe left, swipe right. So after lockdown, by this point, are you a proper couple? Have you sort of made it official?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I say we hadn't seen friends and family, so we hadn't really been able to sort of tell anyone, or no one was able to see us together. But in our mind, we were. And actually, at that point, he was looking to get permanent accommodation. He was living with friends. He was looking to find somewhere of his own, and very unlike me, because I'm very cautious, as I think a lot of people are, but sometimes you can get swept up in the whole kind of love bubble thing. But I did think to myself, what's the point of him getting his own place? Why don't I just give him a month's trial? He can move in here, we can see how that goes, and then if it doesn't work for him, he can still continue with his plans. If it doesn't work for me, I can kind of just say,
Awkward
well, sorry, and
conversations.
yeah, a little bit, but and sure enough, he did. And he moved in without any complaints of, he had probably like 2 drawers of space. I hardly gave him any room, but he didn't moan at all about it. He didn't grumble. He just was like, that's absolutely fine. I'll put my stuff up in the loft, as long as I've got somewhere to kind of put my shoes and my coat and make a coffee in the morning. He was happy. Absolutely over the moon about moving in, and it was absolutely fine, Rosie. Within the month, we went out for a meal sort of to celebrate the end of the month, and I cheekily printed out a sort of certificate that said, congratulations, you've passed your kind of
Oh,
1 month trial.
past your probation.
Yeah, pretty much it was. And it just went from strength to strength. It was just really, like I say, good fun. We just spent a lot of time cooking together, a lot of time just out walking, really, and just
Sounds wonderful.
enjoying each other's company and
Bittersweet,
finding
though.
out. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when did he propose?
Uh,
Assuming he did. That was very, very old
very
school of me. You might have done. Did you do it?
no, I didn't, and I probably would have done if he
Yeah.
maybe hadn't have done. And I had no real timeline on that, because I felt that obviously we hadn't been together that long, but we also kind of knew. I think when you get to the age that we both were, he was 42, I was 40, you kind of know
Yeah.
what you're looking for, or hopefully you should do by that point. And it was a really hot summer's day in July. And we just went out swimming to a river somewhere by Landaf Rowing Club. Just didn't want to go to the beach because we thought everybody will be there, so we'll just take ourselves off to the river. We had a picnic, It was really lovely, and I wasn't expecting it, but I was swimming in the river and he sort of stumbled in, and then I think accidentally stubbed his toe on a big rock, so kind of fell towards me, um, and then just sort of popped up out of the river and was like, look what I found, and on his finger was a ring, and I actually thought
Oh,
he
he
found
found
this in
it.
the river, and I was like, oh wow, you've just found that, oh my gosh, we've got to return it, and he's like, no 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 no, I haven't just found it. You know,
Oh,
and that, yeah, will you kind of, you know, will you marry me? Let's make a life and kind of carry on this wonderful journey. We'd been away quite a lot considering it was COVID in the times we were allowed to. And we'd done a lot of camping and trips. So it felt like already we were living an adventurous, kind of unknown, uncertain life without many plans. And in a
yeah,
way, that was what we both loved, was the uncertainty and unpredictability of the future. Um, but yet knowing that there was going to be someone now
to do it with.
on that journey of unpredictability, it was okay because you've got that safety, that love, that security. Um, uh, and it all just felt lovely. And for me, having never been asked really before properly, knowing that this was genuine, and not just a sort of, you know, he'd been married before a long time ago, in his early 20s, which obviously hadn't worked. But he dated between, you know, since then. And he just said, no, I know this is right. You know, I
Yeah, it's
know
different, right?
yeah, he said, you know, I've been waiting my whole life to find you. You know, this is what I
Oh,
always envisaged. Yeah, this is what I always envisaged my life to be, so I can be myself with you. You don't judge me. You know, the things I've told you, I've never told anybody else, and you haven't shied away from that. You've just said, okay, that was your decision at the time, and you haven't made me feel bad about it. Um, so yeah, it just was a lovely.
yeah. And how wonderful that to make somebody feel like that, and to presumably feel like that in return. You know, that's kind of what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It was also the thing that I realize now that I was desperately had always been searching for. I was always looking for, you know, doing lots of crazy sort of hobbies and interests. And really the root of that was I just wanted to find connection with somebody, you know, whether that be male or female. But obviously we always hope for a partner as well. That was why I was doing all these crazy hobbies and trying to find interests, is that
Yeah,
yeah,
I get that.
connection.
I do get that. Yeah.
Mm.
So when was this that you got engaged? This would be sort of towards the end of 2021, would it be? And you don't
This
have to be
was
precise.
no, it was I've got the 19th of July
You've got
2021.
timeline. Oh, you have
Mm.
all your dates. You've got it engraved into your
Oh,
memory, yeah?
I've only because I've got a post, like a little thing on my wall.
You've got a crib sheet.
No, no, it's a little something that I did to kind of marks some of the
Ah,
significant times in my life, and it's just a little artist drawing of a little hand and a date. Really, it's just sort of
that's nice. I like
something.
the sound of that.
Yeah. Mm.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So you are now engaged. I assume you
Hmm.
like the ring. That's always risky when they buy it themselves. And you are starting to plan a wedding. What sort of wedding were you planning?
Um, yeah, that changed a few times. To be honest with you, he wasn't bothered. He would have quite happily, and he did say, "Let's just go to Cardiff Registry Office and just do it, and then we can have a party afterwards." But I had always wanted to just, you know, just for one day, I just
Mhm.
didn't really want or have lots of people to come along to, but I wanted to just kind of have a nice venue, and put on a nice dress. It was just one of my
That
one things I
right?
wanted to just wear the dress. So we looked at a few things, a few places, and then him being very much him, we'd actually had a beautiful wedding holiday in the Maldives in the
Oh,
January.
nice.
Um, and we kind of thought while we were there, wouldn't this be a really lovely place? Because you just had the beautiful beach, or you had like lovely gardens. And we mulled it over for a bit, and then he happened to come back and say, I found this cracking holiday. And it just sort of came with a free wedding. So as it, not free totally, but kind of, if you went to this resort, beautiful resort, if you wanted to get a wedding, it wasn't that much more.
Yeah.
And the good thing was about this location was that it was also would have been legally binding, because a lot of places abroad,
Yeah.
it's only a civil partnership. It's not actually legal. But in Jamaica, it is. So Jamaica, this beautiful sort of by the sea hut, and then we had arranged for just one wedding coordinator, and then they offer you a very simple cake, a little bit of champagne, a lovely breakfast the next morning, and then we would just sort of source our own suit and dress, fly it over there. And we both said, let's do it at 10 o'clock in the morning, get it out the way, and then we can go snorkeling afterwards and whatever. So fantastic. We spoke to the wedding coordinator here, and also he did speak to the wedding coordinator in Jamaica from the hotel. Send over your music, send over a few photos or whatever you want. And that was that. So it was
that was the plan.
That was the plan. Yeah, it was. So we had a date. A date was planned. The actual, we were going to fly over there, be there for, I think it was 3 or 4 days, and then the wedding would be on sort of day 5 or whatever. Yeah, and then almost like have the wedding, and then I have a few days afterwards, still enjoying a beautiful place. Yeah.
Go on then. What happened? Let's go.
We got back from a lovely short break in Paris in the June, and then just back to normal life. And then, so as I said, I mentioned he was a coach, came back from training on his usual Tuesday afternoon, like he had done hundreds of times before. He did used to like to push himself hard in these sessions. I will say that, as men, I think, just do. I was already at home for some reason. I think I just left before him. He used to stay behind sometimes and chat with the owners. And he came back and he sort of said, I've got a bit of chest pain. My chest is hurting. And he was sort of stretching and flexing his shoulders. And as if he's pulled something, or he's worked at the gym, he must have pulled a muscle, or maybe he's got indigestion, which is what he thought he suffered with. So we were just kind of walking around a little bit, trying to ease this pain off, not really saying an awful lot. I carried on with the ironing, thinking, okay, I'll just keep an eye, but
your
not really
mind doesn't
sure.
automatically go to the worst, right?
No, absolutely not. And he wasn't kind of, sat on the floor looking at me in a fearful way or panicky or anything like that. So I left it for a little while to give him to sort of see if it would just ease. And then I asked him, do you need me to go out and get anything? And he said, can you go and grab me some Gaviscon? I think he's in, pain's right here. I need some Gaviscon. Okay, no problem. Flew out, got some Gaviscon, came back. He took that. He was burping as well. And of course, that is what also made me think it was stomach related.
Mm-hmm.
Another couple hours went by. Again, he still wasn't complaining and saying, I don't know what to do. This is getting worse. I start to ask him some questions like, do you want to go to the hospital? And he was like, no. And he said, oh, actually, it's 9 o'clock. I've got to take a shower. He took a couple of paracetamol. He then got up, and at no point was he on the floor. I say he wasn't looking sweaty or pale or anything like that. And then he stood up and just went and had a shower. And he came back out and he was totally fine, and he got in bed, and he seemed to be in less pain. I let him go to sleep. I stayed up a little bit in case he came to or decided he wanted to go, or the pain got worse, but he didn't. He went to sleep. So I went to sleep, and then in the morning I woke up, and he turned over, but then I noticed his breathing pattern changed. And when I then turned to him to sort of speak to him and wake him, He was just completely unresponsive. So I knew immediately something was very wrong. And in a panic, knew that if I had to give him CPR, I would have to grab him and push him onto the floor. So I had to drag 95 kilograms of him onto the floor, which was very difficult to do without him knocking his head, and kind of, falling off the bed. And then start CPR whilst on the phone to 999, which I did until they arrived. And then they took over. And of course, you just think, even at that point, they're going to shock him. And once they give him some adrenaline and some fluids, and they put fluids into him, they were checking everything. And they, but after that first shock that I was there in the room and I saw them give, and nothing changed, Rosie, not even a flicker. It's not a great sign. But they carried on for 2 hours because I think they also saw what to them was a fit, healthy,
young man,
good weight young person. Yeah, this isn't somebody who was smoking, overweight, suffered or had any history of anything they couldn't understand. And then, of course, just to tell you, sorry, we've tried for 2 hours. I'm like, take him to the hospital. They'll fix him. And they're like, there's nothing the hospital can do that we haven't already done.
I'm so sorry. Were you there in the room for those whole 2 hours?
No, not the whole 2 hours. After watching them come in and try and do the CPR manually for a while before they then brought in a machine, because obviously they had to keep switching, and that's quite exhausting to continue that. I had to leave the room because I kind of in the back of my mind thought that might be the point, that might be what happened. So I didn't want to see it. So no, not for the whole 2 hours. I could just hear them.
It must be so traumatic to watch somebody have CPR, because CPR, when it's done in those circumstances, it's terrifying to watch, isn't it? Because it's quite brutal.
It is. A machine just keeps that. There's something that, like an arch, that they put over, and just.
And was there anybody with you? No. Oh. Did you do that sort of weird thing where you go into kind of autopilot and start offering people cups of tea and things like that? Or were you just completely shut down?
Yeah, I just kept pacing the room, just thinking, no, this isn't
Can't be happening.
This isn't happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this isn't.
And
it's all going to be fine.
It's that almost out of body experience, isn't it? Like you're watching this happen. And I don't know about you, but I found myself thinking, am I behaving correctly? And then that bargaining started, if I promise to never do anything wrong, well, could this change? Is there, do you know what I mean? You start clutching at straws. Your mind starts trying to convince you that this terrible thing isn't happening. Until, was it when they said to you, there's nothing else we can do? Was that the point that you realised? Or do you think you were sort of starting to believe that it might not end well?
Well, like I say, the minute I left that room,
you sort of knew.
I sort of knew, really. And then when one of the paramedics came out, and the minute he said, "Is there someone we can call for you?" Those were the words that I thought,
isn't it?
That but you don't want to believe. Yeah.
And you mentioned that both of you were kind of fairly estranged from your families. So I'm thinking at this point, the automatic person that lots of us will call will be a parent or a sibling or an in-law. Did you have friends that you could call at this point?
I didn't know who to call.
No.
I didn't know.
It's weird, isn't it, when they say, who can I call? And I think, I don't know.
It was really awful in that moment, thinking, who can I call that I know that will be able to come here and really support me? And I ended up, the only person at the time was my boss, because she had been with me through my journey in meeting Mike and helping me choose my dress and everything like that. So and also because I was meant to be in work. Yeah, it was a Wednesday morning. I should have been in work. So I just asked them to call her.
Yeah. And was she kind?
Yeah, she was in the beginning, in the initial couple of weeks.
Yeah. So if you're comfortable doing so, just tell me a little bit about what happened next, because presumably they have to take his body away, and that must be incredibly traumatic to watch the person you love be taken from your home. And then you're kind of left, right, in the rubble of your life that was not. And I'm a sudden death widow, as you know, so I get this. How can this be my life when an hour, 2 hours ago, my life was entirely different?
Mm-hmm.
And the shock and the disbelief is kind of all consuming. How did that impact you? How did you respond at the time?
I mean, looking back now, and I don't really do an awful lot of looking back, Rosie, now, if I'm honest. I've struggled through with very little support. But at that time, just a disbelief, but yet at the same time, just free falling, just going out, just feeling like I was completely, like I would never, ever, ever survive. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know which way to turn. I didn't know. A sort of the practical side of me kicked in. I remember a couple of days later, like getting the Hoover out and just hoovering. And there was a lot of, how can I say this, maybe interference. And there was a lot of quite painful things that happened very soon after with regards to his estranged family, which put a lot of added pressure. And
Are you comfortable talking about that? You don't have to if you don't want to. Are you comfortable talking about that?
yeah, I think it's sort of connected to your question in a way, because it wasn't like a nice, like lots of people swooped in and kind of supported and helped me. It was very much the opposite. It just things like very much wanting to take, within a matter of days, come into the home, come into his workplace, demand to know what he'd signed, where he lived, what he owned, had he signed a will, if he had, where was it, what funeral home had he gone to, like just 1,000 questions, which at the time, like within a day or two of this happening, it was so much on top of what I was already, when Mike left, the police make you sign a piece of paper that says, this person is deceased within, and I'm like, how am I signing a piece of paper to say that he's deceased? And the police go through your home checking to make sure that you haven't killed your partner. They took his mobile phone, they took his iPad, and you are a suspect. Immediately you are a suspect, which I'm sure because it was at home, you see, that's the problem.
Well,
So
they searched my house. They did. They came and searched the house. It was quite a cursory search. They didn't, it wasn't. I think they believed me.
Yes, yeah.
They have to follow the protocol, and
do.
I can remember thinking, God, I feel like a criminal. I feel like a criminal.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So no, it was quite traumatic after that, in all of that kind of added pressure, and then a lot of other people then wanting to be involved in what was going to happen afterwards. And you just think, I'm not ready to look at any of this stuff, but people messaging you, and then people are suddenly messaging things, and then it's all out there suddenly on social media, and you're thinking, hang on a minute, this is your person, and someone else has posted something or is saying something or is communicating things about your person before you've had chance to almost like vet it, because you've just become fiercely protective of what somebody may say who may not be as kind about your person and as protective as you are. They almost want to take this as an opportunity to, oh, now we can speak badly because he's gone and he's not there to defend himself, and you're having to do that on top of, oh my God, what's just happened? Yeah.
How awful.
Yeah.
And we've talked quite a lot on the podcast about that feeling when you're widowed of becoming public property. It's a bit like so when you're pregnant, people have always got an opinion on, you're too big, you're too small, blah blah blah. And it's a bit like when you're widowed, that you're too sad, or you're grieving too much, or you're not grieving enough, or you've met somebody too soon. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's got an opinion on how you should grieve, and it sounds to me like yours happened really super quick. And another thing about being widowed is the loss of control, because something happens in your life that you cannot control. And so if you've then got people, for want of a better term, sticking their oar in and trying to take over and asking you things and trying to get you to do things, that's all control being stripped away again.
Yeah.
It's really infantilizing almost.
Yeah. And it felt really sort of hurtful and insensitive that, you're like my person who I love most in the world has died, and now all you care about is what you can get from
What you
him,
can get,
as in
really
terms
mercenary.
of, yeah,
Really mercenary. And at this point, you guys aren't married. And I'm wondering if this was a factor in all of this, because although, you and I know that you can be in a relationship with somebody as committed as if you were married, but in the eyes of the law, it can complicate things, and particularly things like wills. If their will hasn't been updated, if you're not married, it doesn't automatically transfer. So how were you impacted by that?
Yeah, that was, and funny enough, we talked about that, but of course, because we were planning on getting married, we both knew that in the event of our death, once we were married, it would just automatically go to the other person, and that's what we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
We were fine with that, but knowing straight away that so he had a daughter who he was estranged from, so that was his next living blood relative, and he'd only just come into her life at the age of 18 through her choice. So, but yes, it made things very difficult because, as I say, because she didn't know him, she was more bothered about what can I now have, or I'm entitled to, and that's completely fine. But because there was no emotional attachment, it was just, well, he's my biological father, and therefore I will take what's rightly mine, but in the process, kind of trampling over me, and very little consideration, which I understand. Why would she? She's 18. She doesn't know me either. Why would she? I appreciate that. But yeah, it made things quite tricky, to the point, as I say, where she wanted to come into the house and go through his things. But I just couldn't let that happen, Rosie. So I sort of tried to agree with her, but that got quite messy and quite nasty. So I had to, and I really did this to buy myself some time, was I had to instruct solicitors to almost just kind of to act as a shield from the perpetual, because at this point there was a lot of how can I say, negative and hurtful things being said about him that had happened maybe, and I don't know whether that was true or not. I couldn't say otherwise. It certainly wasn't the story that I'd heard from Mike, but I wasn't in a position to say that it didn't happen because obviously I couldn't challenge that. But at the time it was really hurtful and painful for me to hear somebody kind of talking about him badly. So the solicitor just almost acted as a shield for me and bought me some time to just calm myself and deal with the funeral, because we hadn't even had the funeral, Rosie, at this point. Yeah, I mean, this was literally weeks and days after it happened. So I just needed to kind of say, look, please, just can you give me some time? Yeah, just leave me alone. And then luckily that is what happened. It still was a little bit messy, even with the solicitors, the things that they were requesting, disputing that we were going to get married. So yeah, it was difficult. And in the end, it came down to a very cold list, an inventory of items that I'd said, here we go, these are the items that I have, these are the items that are yours. to have, including his phone and other items that were. I will say, Rosie, I didn't give away everything because I thought I need these things. I kept things, put his wallet, his sunglasses, his favorite aftershave. I had to keep those things, I gave away clothes, of course I did, but there were some things, Rosie, that I just couldn't give
Yeah.
away. And because then she started asking for things like she wanted the bed, she wanted the sofa, and I'm like,
Stop
these
it.
these are things that, what are you going to do with a sofa or half a sofa? What am I going to do? Am I going to be spiteful and cut it in half because we paid half of it? No, I wasn't, but this is the sofa that actually we chose together, and I don't want to give that away. So and the bed was his, and why would you want
And it's
a
just
bed
strip you of
of
not
the
only kind of emotional attachments in terms of his things, but in the middle of grieving your person, somebody wants to take your freaking bed
bed?
away.
Yeah,
Like, imagine in that moment having to arrange the delivery of a bed, having
the
to
bed.
choose a
Yeah,
mattress, having to get it built in that maelstrom
yeah,
of chaos that's going on.
yeah,
This feels
yeah.
really cruel. I'm so sorry that this
Mm.
happened to you.
Yeah. And then the other thing that was quite traumatic was because she lives up north, so not local, she had also put a stop on the release, so they couldn't release him from the hospital to the funeral home where I wanted to go and visit him. So because there was a little contention in that she wanted him to be transported up north, and I was like, but I can't visit him then. I had to beg, for her to let him be released to a funeral home down here. I had to beg involvement in the funeral, and this was such a terrible thing to have to, again, speak to somebody who really wanted to, again, take control of everything from, where the funeral was going to be, who was going to carry the coffin, who was going to be there, the theme of the wake, like everything. And I was like, I just couldn't let that happen, Rosie. And
No.
I did fight it in the best, most compassionate way that I could, which was actually appealing to her. Please, I meant something to your dad, so please let me do this. Like I let her completely do the wake, but I wanted to do the funeral, but I still included, of course, photographs of her and that side of his life before he met me. He had a life before he met me. So but it was very painful to have to request that your person be close to you, even at
I
that
can't
point.
even imagine. I can't. And it feels vindictive. I can't speak because I don't know the person, but it feels like there was no need for it.
Yeah,
There was no need
yeah.
to be so cruel.
Mm.
And how was the funeral? Did you manage to have the funeral that you wanted in the end? Well,
Sort of not. There was pieces of music that she wanted that I didn't want in, but I included them. She wanted this video link that I did not want. It felt like a live streaming thing, which I just did
oh
not
yeah,
want.
yeah.
But she said she wanted, and because Rosie, I wanted to keep certain items. At this point, I thought I will try and do and be as accommodating for her as possible, in the hope that she would then say, oh, well, you've allowed me to have what I want, I will now allow you to keep those items. But
No,
of course, no, that didn't happen.
no. We sort of assume people have the same moral compass as us sometimes,
Yeah,
don't we?
yeah. But no, I managed to incorporate. I did write. I mean, it was awful, but we'd had like a celebrant, and tried to incorporate some of his favorite photographs, and really highlight. I mean, just literally a couple of well, the year before, Rosie, he got an MBE. He got an
Oh
MBE.
wow!
Yeah.
What was that for?
So during COVID, in the first lockdown, on his rounds, so he was a courier. And he noticed a young lad who was stood on a bridge, on like a carriageway, going over quite a busy road, but there wasn't a pathway, like a pedestrian pathway, and he went around this sort of flyover, if you like, kind of thing, and just thought, why is that young lad there? That doesn't seem right. Something seems wrong. And he circled back round and stopped and parked the van and just sort of said to this lad, is everything okay? And with that, this young lad just started climbing over the fence. So Mike just jumped out, and all he was able to do at this point was just hold him down onto the railings, because he'd already gone halfway over. So he was already head and shoulders over, and he was, I want to say about 17, 18. So he was obviously fully grown, so quite heavy. So luckily, 2 women had also seen this young lad before, but had carried on up further to a supermarket, but then thought to themselves, we have to go back. So luckily 2 women who had driven around clocked and thought, we need to go back round. So they drove back and saw Mike at that point at the dual carriageway, and were able to phone the emergency services. So there was air ambulance out looking for this young lad. So he was able to
He saved his life.
save his life, yeah. So he didn't know he'd been nominated by his work for that particular event, and he got a letter through then a few months later, and he said, when he got the letter, because it's all very formal with the HR, and he said, oh, is this a good thing or a bad thing? He wasn't sure if it was something very formal. And I said, oh, no, I think this is a good thing. You're on the the Queen Honours list. And we, in the June of that year, we went to Buckingham Palace, we went to the garden party, and he was just so made up. He was absolutely over the moon. It was so exciting for him, and he was just really proud to be there, and just
to have saved that kid's life.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you ever get, or did Mike ever get to meet him or his parents again?
No, and I said that to him, and he just said, oh, well, if the lad wants to meet me, fine. He said, but I've done my job, kind of thing. That was his, and I did think about that, obviously, since, is there any way that I could but I don't know how I would even go about finding that young lad now.
Well, if anybody's listening to this and knows, then please do get in touch. The word that I've kind of written down here as you were talking then is legacy, because one of the things when somebody dies is you want to preserve their legacy. You want to feel like they left behind an impact. And I don't think impacts come much bigger than that, This young man who was obviously suffering so greatly, but was at the beginning of his life and could have made a decision that would have ended it. And Mike was there, and he was brave enough to step up and help. And I think, you've told me what a fantastic man he was. And I think this really, really illustrates that, because sadly, a lot of people wouldn't have gone to help.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think, Rosie, that just is a reflection of, I think, early on in his life when he was struggling and there was no one really there for him. His parents didn't want to know. And so I think he recognized that early on in his life, there were key people that really helped him eventually. And so he knew what it was like to be kind of, feeling in a pretty bad place. Yeah.
And those, as we know ourselves, those who have been broken are often the most empathetic. So ultimately, after the funeral and has happened, typically this is when a lot of support wanes. And what you're telling me is actually, even at that point, people weren't being supportive. They were being the opposite. They were being supportive. Destructive sounds a bit harsh, but actually probably accurate. So how do you move forward? I know you're never going to stop grieving, but obviously you've got to try and figure out what you're going to do next. Tell me a little bit about this phase.
I mean, I'm still probably figuring that out, but
me too.
But in the early days, I was desperate for support, but nobody was really able to show up. There were a few kind people who sat with me, but sort of struggled with it. And I think you begin to realize that that's also taking its toll on people, their mental health. So, and I think for me, Rosie, it was the discovery, the finding out what I have to do was the pathway. So figuring out how I get through that was almost like my purpose at that point, was not thinking about anything other than how do I how do I get through the next hour, the next day? And I went on a crazy quest for finding books, finding podcasts, who's out there, speaking to other people, what's your recommendation, just like 100 million different things. I mean, I tried Reiki, I tried
Oh,
hypnotherapy, all sorts of, a spiritual medium. You try, I couldn't do yoga and breath work. That was just completely out for me. Weirdly, like I say, lots of cleaning.
oh yeah,
But what I really wanted was to sit with somebody and
be
just
held.
cry. And I think the painful few years following that, my friends having not been able to sit with me, Rosie, and see that has really added to the length of time that this has really gone on
Yeah.
for me. So I learned to just cry on my own, like witness my own pain. I cry to everybody, Rosie, cry to anyone who would listen, in the supermarket, the postman, the dentist, wherever I was, I would cry and tell them. Obviously, I'm not like that now, probably the opposite. But for me, the thing was finding out, the day to day, getting through every day, was finding out how I get through this, if that makes sense. So it was the
Mm,
searching for what do I do now? And also I
yeah.
went back to work after about 6 weeks, mainly because I was just at home on my own. And work has been the only sort of fairly consistent thing in my life. And at work, he wasn't missing at work. And I felt
Yeah.
like I was maybe going to be of some value. Because for me, I've always felt like I needed to be of service to somebody. And of course, the person that I'd been of service to, or loved to be of service to, is suddenly now gone.
Mm,
What else am I going to do? There is no one supporting me. I have to go and support other people in a strange way, which was just do my job, just figure out how I can be of service to somebody else. Probably poorly at that time, but it
wow.
was the only thing I could focus on. Eventually, I managed to go out, but it had to be somewhere quiet, so walking.
Yeah.
And that was kind of it. And very slowly, it was a cup of coffee here and there. Yeah, just very
And it's very
slowly.
easy actually to become isolated because there becomes a point where you talked about the kind of the impact that your grief would have on other people.
Mm,
And this is quite a common theme, and I'm guilty of it as well. We sort of moderate what we tell or
mm,
we downplay it because we don't want to shock or distress. Sometimes I get a sort of sadistic kick out of doing it. But that's widow privilege, I think.
mm.
But this idea that you're sort of worrying about how this enormous pain, even if somebody experiences a tiny fraction of that, because that's all they're experiencing
Yeah.
when you share your pain, that we try and protect them.
Hmm.
And another thing I really like that witnessing your own pain, and this is something that I do in therapy because I have always kind of relied on other people. I had very supportive parents. I moved in with my first boyfriend at 17. Then I was with somebody else. Then I met Ben. There's always been somebody in a kind of a position of care for me almost. And I don't really know how to support myself. And a lot of the work I've been doing with her is about being the person that you needed in that moment
Hmm.
for yourself. And that is a really strange concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
Treat yourself like someone you love and care about.
Yeah.
Have you eaten today? Have you rested? Do you really need to? And I'm not brilliant at it, but I'm getting better. But in that moment where, people think when somebody dies, you'll be inundated with support. There'll be meals cooked. I've talked to people, particularly in America, where they do these meal trains and people bring food to their house. The reality of that isn't always the case.
No.
And this idea that even at this early stage that you're having to think, right, well, I've got to support myself through
Hmm.
this. I think that that's really brave, but also really, really scary. Did you have any therapy or anything like that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I started off quite quickly, which probably was the wrong thing because within a matter of days, I felt like because there wasn't anybody, I felt like, gosh, therapy, somebody's going to be the only
Mhm.
person that can help me.
I'm paying this person, I can tell them
Yeah,
anything.
that's right. But really, all I did was just cry, Rosie.
Yeah.
And it really, they were saying things to me which I thought, I mean, are you really saying this to me?
Mm-hmm.
It also didn't help that my best friend of 12 years, again, also walked away. So not only so on top of everything else, she also decided that it was too much.
Why? Just too difficult, too much, your grief was
Too
too
much
much for her. Wow,
yeah.
okay.
So yes, I did get therapy, but I'm now on my fourth therapist. They all were fine at the time. In that moment, they gave me what I required, but either then decided they wanted to end that therapy, or they weren't right for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I see somebody now once every 2 weeks, and it's really mainly, Rosie, just somebody for me to talk about the thoughts that come up now in terms of what am I doing with, what now? What about
Yeah.
job? What about where am I going to live? How do I feel about plans, no plans? Do I, just sort of almost thinking about these questions around there is no one in my life now apart from me. And in a way, people see that as freedom. Oh, isn't it great that you can just do what you want and you've got all this freedom? But actually, it's really hard to make that decision because then everything rests on you. And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of liked having someone else to consider. And when you have no one else to consider apart from yourself, it's great. But unless you know really what you want to do deep down, you have a passion for a thing, it's kind of like, what do I do? Like, do
Yeah.
I,
Sort of floating a bit.
floating around going, and I've done a lot of sort of trying to follow models of designing your life whereby you sort of figure out 5 different versions of a life for yourself, and sort of pick one almost and try and follow that. Lots of different methodologies, really, I guess, for figuring out what I lean towards. Is there something that gives me slightly more energy or joy or pleasure, and try and go towards that thing? But it's difficult because obviously everything
It's
feels pretty
tough.
dark.
It's tough. And I'm sure you feel the same way. You can feel like you're making enormous strides forward and you're feeling really good. You're going to the gym, you're doing all the
Mm.
things that you know you need to do to feel better. And then out of the blue, the grief wave kind of
Yeah,
wipes you out and you think, well, I'm not all right. This isn't fair.
yeah,
And I get very scared that I'm going to get stuck in that
yeah,
darkness again. And I now know, because it's happened enough, that you come back out again and each time it's a bit quicker. But yeah, I think I would have massively struggled if I was having to do this alone.
yeah.
And although having my children has been challenging at times because, single parent, I think there's always somebody in my house. I'm not had to sort of, and again, this sort of avoidance is a kind of well-known coping mechanism. Some people work, busy, drinking, drugs, whatever it might be. None of us want to sit with those
Mm-hmm.
feelings because why would you?
Yeah,
They're
it's
horrible.
awful. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But again, my counselor, I should name check her in this. She said to me, if you don't talk about them, it doesn't mean those feelings aren't there. They're still there.
Mm.
They're just sitting
Underneath the
deep down.
surface, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I found for me the best thing when I was really at kind of crisis point was I would just have a shower. And I know that sounds daft,
Okay.
but it was something
No.
about the comfort of the water and the warmth on my skin was the
Mm-hmm.
closest I could get to comfort, and it would calm me down.
Baths for me.
Yeah,
Baths. I take a
yeah.
book into the bath and just kind of, and it's the only room in the house with a lock as well. It's the only place I can escape.
Mm.
So, what does life look like for you now? Are you still in the same house?
I am, yeah, and I've thought a lot about leaving. And I think what it is, Rosie, is that it's subconsciously it's our home, and it feels
Mm-hmm.
safe and it feels full of lovely memories. But yet at the same time, obviously the bedroom is where he died, and that's quite difficult to sort of be around And although I've changed lots within, I've painted walls, I've carpeted, I've had a new bathroom, all these distraction things, as you mentioned.
Of course, yeah.
So it's kind of changed, but it's still really the same four walls. So I have thought about it. I've thought about upping sticks and moving far, far away. I thought, can I maybe emigrate to New Zealand, Australia? Shall I go there and just start again where nobody knows me and I don't have to almost have this thing around me? So I've thought of lots of different things.
And you've got time as well. I think that one of the things you want to heal quickly, so you sort of run at everything quite impulsively. I wanted to move out of my house. I didn't want to live in the house where the police had knocked on the door. Then I looked into the cost of moving and decided to stay. Like you, I took the back off the house. I put a new kitchen in. It was decorated, but it was always that house. And I have since moved, but it also is the place that they were, and it's the last place they were. It's a real, I mean, some people do, some people don't. How about your relationship with your sort of estranged in-laws? Did that settle down?
No, that has never, we've never spoken, at the point of before the funeral and wanting to come in and take, and then introducing solicitors. I did at the point where I handed over his items. I had written a little card to her just to say, look, I would love to have, a relationship with you, tell you stories about Mike if you want to know more about him. And I hope you will look after these things. I did try to sort of, once she was maybe ready and I was ready, to pick that back up and maybe try, but she just ripped it up.
No. And that's really tough, isn't it? Because you've been the bigger person. You've said, I want to build bridges. I don't want this animosity. And to have that kind of thrown back in your face, that must feel like a real rejection as well.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I wish it hadn't happened to you. And I certainly wish that your journey through this bit of grief had been easier.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're still here, for starters. Okay, let's take that win. And not only are you still here, but you've come on the podcast. You've come on and done something which is really, really scary and really, really brave, because you're telling your story. You're talking about Mike. You're going into this really dark, horrible time of your life. But I hope that what you will feel afterwards is a sense of achievement, because you're committing this story to the archives. It's going to be there forever, maybe. And this is how we talked about, wanting to, people who've been through a traumatic experience wanting to help others. So Mike, when he's helping this young lad on the bridge, and actually what you're doing by sharing your story is somebody will listen, much like you will have listened to other people's episodes, and they will find comfort, they will find solidarity, and they'll feel seen. I know that's a bit of a trite expression, but you don't know anybody like you when this happens. You don't know anybody. You maybe know some friends of your parents who are widowed or people in the media, but it lands at your door and you feel so alone.
Yeah, that's right. Because most people in your kind of age group, they haven't been through this. Everyone kept saying to me about, when their dog died, or when their
not the dog.
Yeah, the dog, the grandparent, and I'm like, it's not the same thing. No. It's really not. No. So yeah,
because it's everything, isn't it? It's your past, your future, your best friend, your the person who pays half the bills. I know that sounds really mercenary, but suddenly you're in charge. I find that now still, we're having to move house again, and I'm having to decide what to do with my youngest daughter, because I'll have to move her school, and you're making all these decisions by yourself. And I want somebody to help. Sound off. I want, yeah. Oh, Michelle, it's been really, really, really lovely to talk to you today. I think that you've spoken so beautifully about Mike. Is there anything else you wanted to tell me before we finish? I don't like to leave anything unsaid.
Oh, gosh. What is there to say other than, I think ultimately, as much as at the moment, and I think people go through a phase of not wanting anybody else, there's almost a period of time where I think you have to almost wear that grief cloak and be on your own. And also that time of isolation is not necessarily a bad thing. It's the time that allows you to really understand yourself a bit more, And through that and figuring out how you get through that day, that month, that week, brings you an added layer of strength every day, gradually, and then you can reintroduce yourself to the rest of the world, because really, other than connection and love, I mean, what is it?
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's all people ever really want. And as much as I didn't think I'd say this to myself, because the last 3 years have been very, very closed off with people, I know that deep down, that's what I will have to seek, and that will come back, so I just, for anybody out there who's much earlier, allow yourself that time on your own, to be with your pain, because it will shape
I
you.
agree. And I think the temptation is to, like we said, keep yourself busy, maybe get into another relationship very quickly. There's lots, and there's no judgment here. These are all, you do what you need to do. But sometimes you're right, you do have to sit with that pain, and it is ugly and it's horrible. It's literally painful. It's in the name. But it's like, I always quote this, but the bear hunt, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you've got to go through it. And you do.
That's absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, Michelle, as I've said to you already, I think you're an incredibly brave woman, and I think that I wish you'd been treated kinder during this. I really do. I think everybody assumes that you'll be wrapped up with love, and I really wish that had been the case. But please know that you are part of the Widowed AF tribe now. That means you're one of mine. So you can reach out to me anytime you like. And I really wanted to do a festival this year, but I just haven't got the headspace with the house move and everything. So next year I'm going to do something, and we're going to get together, and we'll try and get this kind of big community of widowers and widows together, and we'll just, I don't know, put some sequins on and dance in the sunlight or something, or sit in a dark room and rock back and forth. Both work.
Sounds good. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. You take care of yourself, okay?
Yeah.
You take care of yourself. It's tough out there. And for anybody who has been affected by today's episode, you can message me, and I can always pass a message on to Michelle as well. And, whatever you're doing, however you're doing it out there, you take care of yourselves as well. And I'll be back with you very soon. Thanks, Michelle. It's been really lovely.
Thanks,
you
Rosie.
take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time on Widowed AF.